good evening, and welcome to the October edition of The Edge. I'm your host, as always, Trevor Lewington. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Every third Thursday of the month, I'm talking to community and business leaders here in Southern Alberta, and we're exploring their insights on how you build your business or build your community or build your life. And, regardless of whether you're watching on YouTube or Roku or Fire TV or Apple TV, look, we don't care how you got here. We're just really glad that you could join us this evening. And tonight, I'm excited to have Dr. Brad Donaldson, although I won't call him that anymore. It'll just be Brad, because I know he prefers that. The president and CEO of Lethbridge Polytechnic. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Trevor. Great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation, especially talking about this transition, because I'm tripping over Lethbridge College every day. It's not that anymore. So we'll talk about that. But I know you've got about 2 decades of experience in manufacturing globally before you ever came to the academic world. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about your background? I'm a manufacturing nerd myself, so I'm keen to learn more about that.
Yeah, you're quite right, Trevor. Sort of preempt that if I had been asked when I graduated out of engineering, would I be doing this job today? I kind of look at you kind of strange and wonder what are
you even talking about?
Oh, yeah. But to me, it's a real life example I like to show that where you start and where your path takes you can change very quickly in many fun and exciting ways. So yeah, to your point, I did start off in the manufacturing sector. Interestingly, I'm a chemical engineer out of the University of Toronto. Thought I was coming west to the oil patch, and
famous last words.
Yeah, famous last words, and certain federal policies in the mid '80s to put a dent in that. But I was fortunate to get a manufacturing engineering job with Northern Telecom, which became Nortel, which became nothing. Right. As they were looking to eliminate chemicals from the manufacturing process. So there was a interesting fit there. It's sort of in the circuit board manufacturing, a lot of chemicals were used to process the manufacturing of those, and
acids and etchings and different things.
Yeah, and that day, Freon was a big issue because it was the ozone depleting chemical. So it was how do you get Freon as a cleaning agent out of your manufacturing processes. So yeah, it's a little detour, but my chemical background got me into an industry that I didn't expect to be in. Spent a number of years as a manufacturing engineer, then into larger project engineering, transferring product around the world to different markets. So that, again, another little segue into something different. And had the opportunity, I guess, back in those days, if you did well, they sent you to Newfoundland. So I spent a couple of years running a manufacturing plant in Newfoundland, which was a great experience. You're away from the big mothership plant and an opportunity.
You really do have to make it work on your own.
You do, and you realize how far away St. John's is from central Canada, and certainly a lot further from here. A great opportunity to cut my teeth on a leadership role, running a small manufacturing operation as the plant manager. Came into different roles in Nortel back in the Toronto area with more senior operations, running big plants. And during the mid-90s, Nortel was making a lot of divestitures of their manufacturing, so I chose to leave and went to different organizations in the Toronto area for manufacturing, circuit boards to metal cabinets to 300-foot transmission towers. So a wide range. Manufacturing back then was a very volatile, well, it's still volatile sector, so there was a lot of churn and acquisitions and spin-offs and so on. So there I was 20 years later, running a manufacturing plant outside of Toronto, manufacturing large transmission towers. And that's when my manufacturing days ended and an interesting shift came.
Okay, cool. I'll come to that transition in a second because I'm very fascinated about that leap. I think about my time in manufacturing, having at one time in my career 3 plants, and I always found it that it was, I really loved the tangibility of it because you could see production, you could see numbers, and you could almost sort of pat yourself on the back a little bit that with your team is like those things I made. Yeah. Was that part of, did you enjoy that part
of manufacturing? There's an absolute appeal to manufacturing in that you can see your efforts and the processes and what you're trying to accomplish come to life very quickly. Part of the organization I was working with was manufacturing 60,000 circuit boards a week. So you love to see the counter go and the quality metrics being met, and just being able to achieve
all about zero defects.
Yeah, and just being able to achieve the output, which is very tangible to see. It's right there. That was part of the appeal of manufacturing, to be honest. But it's also part of the grind. In the world of manufacturing, you're never fast enough, cheap enough, or good enough. Which, on the one hand, is very motivating. On the other hand, it's constantly in your face.
Yeah, we used to joke that it was almost like 0 to 0 in 6 days or less. You had a bang out award-winning week, and then 6 days later, your boss is like, "Great, that's awesome," but that was last week.
Yeah. But a lot of product changes, which was in the telecom industry, products even back in the 90s, early century were changing very quickly. So there was always that dynamism to it, and how do we make this thing work, and how do we? So it's exciting.
Right. Okay, so you're in this exciting world. You got 2 decades under your belt. You know, some senior leadership roles, and then slide into the academic world. That feels like a right-hand turn.
It was a completely unexpected right-hand turn into a very different road than I ever expected to be on. I received a call one afternoon about a dean position at SAIT in Calgary.
Okay.
They're organized around sectors, and so the School of Manufacturing and Automation had an opening for a dean.
Sounds like a good fit.
Yeah, and so a recruiter got a hold of my name, gave me a call, and my first reaction was, "You called the right person." And as we talked more and I got to understand about how SAIT as an organization ran around the product, around the sectors that the education supports, came out for a visit, and lo and behold, made the transition. So it was a huge transition. Not only was it a change of sector, so going from manufacturing to post-secondary education, it was a relocation to the Wild West from the I like to call it the former center of the universe.
You've since reformed your thinking, I'm assuming.
I have, and daughters that were 20 and 18 years old at the time that said, "Well, I guess we better come because we're going to be homeless if we don't." And they said they were going to come for 6 months, and that was in 2005, and they're still here.
Nice. Well, glad to hear that.
Yeah, they're definitely Western folks, and we all are.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, you're at SAIT, you had a number of roles there. Can you talk a little bit about the arc of your career within that institution?
Yeah. When I mentioned when I came into SAIT, it was the Dean of the School of Manufacturing and Automation, which had programs, trades and technologies associated with the manufacturing sector. So welding, machinery, millwright, so a very strong apprentice component, manufacturing engineering technology with multiple streams, including automation, non-destructive testing. So it was a real good fit to my background, having coming out of the many cases the metal fabrication world, which is the large part of the manufacturing at that time in the province. Anyway, it was wonderful for me to be able to be part of enabling students to fulfill their opportunities and career aspirations to go into their fields of choosing, and being able to connect with industry. I think part of the appeal of having someone like me come into the school was that I could do the industry talk. I understood the industry needs. I'd lived it, and now I was helping to develop and design and evolve programs that the graduates were able to go into their careers in the manufacturing sector and do very well. So it was there was a strong link to what I used to do, and a very good pathway into what I needed to accomplish as an educator.
Because that's often sometimes an unfounded criticism of the post-secondary sector is a lack of connection to industry, a lack of understanding. So did you find doing a lot of translation back and forth, I would imagine, trying to bring those two pieces together? To
a degree. The Polytechnic and college model has instructors come from the sector as well. So it's, the welding instructors have had a welding career. The mechanical engineering instructors have had a mechanical engineering career, so they've been there, so they're able to bring the real world experience. It's, you do the theory and you do the math around some of the technologies, but they're able to translate that into, okay, this is what you're learning today. This is how it's going to be applied, and a lot of industry visits as well to help reinforce that. A lot of lab work to reinforce that. So it was a really great opportunity to do that. So there wasn't much translating to do in terms of content. The challenge is always, how do you make sure your programs are current? Industry changes fast.
Right.
Post-secondary has never been a cruise to being fast.
That's true, yes.
And so that's part of the challenge and part of the opportunity is how do we make sure that our programming keeps pace with what's happening in industry? And that's becoming an increasingly difficult challenge.
Okay.
Yeah. So from there, I thought I was happy being a dean, and I was, and didn't have any aspirations to go higher in the hierarchy. But the opportunity came at Red Deer College at the time, long before it became Red Deer Polytechnic. And it was that time I'd been as a dean for 5.5 years, and thought, you know what, I think I'm ready to take on the challenge of a bigger portfolio, a bigger influence, connections across sectors that were unfamiliar to me. Red Deer has nursing programs and healthcare programs, education programs, which were different to me. So it was a real
lots to learn there.
Lots to learn, and I think that's a great point, Trevor. Every transition in my career has been one that I've had to learn a lot. You go into a role thinking you understand it. You don't truly understand it till you do it, and that's been. I love to learn, so those are very motivating for me. So I spent 4 years in Red Deer College, and interesting enough, as it turns out, we'll get to my Lethbridge Polytechnic role in a minute. RDC at that time was looking to become a university. That was part of the trajectory.
Okay.
Back in to provide a need for Central Alberta that wasn't there in terms of a large community, and 350,000 in Central Alberta that didn't have direct access to a university. So I was there for the development of that model, the development of the argument, and before the transition happened, where it became a Red Deer Polytechnic as opposed to Red Deer University, which I believe was the right move in terms of what it's doing and what it's capable of doing.
Bridging the gap, but sort of still maintaining both sides.
Yeah, absolutely right. The role for the VP academic at SAIT came up, and I kind of knew what SAIT was about. They had a new president at that time, which caused some transitions in the organization, which created the opening. So, I put my hat in the ring and went to there, having learned a lot in my Red Deer experience. SAIT as a dean obviously was my first role in post-secondary, so I come in as this guy who thinks he knows what's going on, and realized that there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Red Deer experience broadened that, which allowed me to come back to SAIT as vice president academic with that accumulated learning. And I think that's the message that I'd like to portray this evening, that every step along the way has been accumulated learning, which allowed the next step to happen.
Right. It all layers and unlocks the next opportunity.
It does, absolutely. Okay. So I spent almost 7 years at SAIT. Was wondering whether that would be the final stop on the journey, at least in terms of full-time employment, and obviously led to the opening, me becoming the president and CEO of Lethbridge College at the time. Again, another great opportunity, obviously in a smaller institution than SAIT, but I have an affinity for more of that smaller institution. I think that's one of the things I learned going to Red Deer, being smaller than SAIT.
Right. You
can get more connected, and that fits my style, where I like to develop the relationships with as many people that work in the organization, and a lot easier to do when you're an institution of 1,000 or so people than you are with an institution of 3,000 people.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you've been here just over 2 years.
Just over 2 years, yeah.
And so, as you've had a chance to explore Southern Alberta, is there anything that stands out to you, or is there sort of that gem that the family's like, oh, we're so glad we have access to this?
I will give a couple of examples of that, but I think one of the biggest things to me was, maybe it's a failing on my part, the unknown of what Lethbridge in Southern Alberta is. Living in Calgary, Calgary is so oil and gas heavy that you get swamped out by that sector.
Right.
And that Lethbridge and Medicine Hat and the communities down here, even Stirling.
The important ones, yeah.
How interesting the agricultural sector is. And just the scope of technology that's used in the agricultural sector, and how vital it is to our economy. So there's that from an industry perspective, if you'll let me use that word, but just the connectedness of Lethbridge and the smaller communities around it's very powerful. And I've wondered, is it a result of the religious influence, the European family-based influence creates a very different family-oriented culture than I experienced in Lethbridge, in Calgary, but also in Red Deer, I think, because of the different industries that pervade there. Coulees are cool. I mean, I've driven by them before, but when you spend time walking in them, you realize there's a whole ecosystem that's not obvious.
Right.
So just from, for geographical perspective, Nikayuko Gardens, I was not aware that there was such a strong Japanese history and heritage here.
Right.
Yeah, that's just fascinating. And the ability to get around town. 15 minutes, you can get pretty much anywhere in Lethbridge. 20 minutes, it's a really bad day. Calgary's a little different. And my wife and I, our daughters are obviously older and grown. They still live in Calgary. Just the ability to connect with people is so much better in this size of a community. Friendly people. Yeah,
it's a very unique environment. It's hard to describe to people that haven't experienced it.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So we're thoroughly enjoying it here.
Good. Well, we're super glad that you chose Lethbridge and have stayed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about sort of the more technical stuff. So the government recently announced this transition from Lethbridge College to Lethbridge Polytechnic.
Yep.
Maybe you can walk people through what the heck a polytechnic is, and what, I guess, maybe some of the history of how did that decision get made, and why does it matter?
Yeah, so the roots of that actually go back, interestingly enough, to Red Deer, when it was looking to become a university. Under the NDP government, that was on track. The incoming Conservative government felt that they were better suited to be identified as a polytechnic. And I'll explain what that means in terms of polytechnic. So that happened 5 or so years ago. Grand Prairie became Northwestern Polytechnic.
Right.
Red Deer and Grand Prairie were working together to provide that. Initially, it was university teaching in areas which don't have a university presence, but polytechnic is what they are. And so that happened. I think it was a good move on the government's part to call them a polytechnic, and that'll play into why Lethbridge is now a polytechnic. Polytechnics are driven towards providing career-oriented education, apprentices, certificates, diplomas, degrees that relate directly to a career. We don't do a Bachelor of Arts in History. We don't do the liberal arts type of things because there's less of a direct connection. You can't go to the liberal arts community and say, what are you looking for? You can go to the agricultural manufacturers, agricultural harvesters, the welding shops. You can say, what are you looking for? What do you need?
What are the specific skills and things we need to deliver to you to employ you?
Yeah. What do you need in somebody you're looking for, and the skills, and we translate that back into our program. So there's an extremely strong connection to the sectors, manufacturing, honestly, healthcare, education sector, social services sector, the justice sector. All our programs are geared towards having graduates move into a career. They can go directly to a job or take the next level. For example, our nursing program, we do 2 years at the Polytechnic, and they finish 2 years at the university to get the degree. We also have our own degrees, but so it's the programming that's directly related to industry, and making sure that we're connecting with the needs of industry so that our graduates hit the road running. The other aspect which really has emerged in Lethbridge over the last 5 years is the amount of applied research we're doing. And so research is often thought in the post-secondary world as is prevalent in the universities, where they're doing discovery research. They're looking for the next
science for the sake of science, sort of.
The next quantum particle.
Right.
And not to say that they don't do leading edge. There's a lot of great medical research that happens, for example. But the research that we're doing is now is to help industry solve a problem that helps their sector today. A couple of great examples out of Lethbridge Polytechnic is our aquaponics program. I never knew there was so many fish in southern Alberta until I saw the tanks. So it's about enabling a species of fish to grow to meet the market, the food market for fish. But the interesting point around that is that the waste from the fish becomes the fertilizer for the greenhouse, and so it's a continuous loop where the water comes out of the tanks for the fish is used in the production of the greenhouse materials, is recirculated, cleaned. So it's that continuous process, but it allows a fish product to be developed, but it allows greenhouse products to be grown. And we're doing the research now in terms of what's the right humidity, the lighting, what are all the other variables that play into an effective greenhouse, because that's a huge sector in southern Alberta. And I think it's an opportunity to do a lot of wonderful things, locally grown product. You don't have to truck it in from southern U.S., fly it in or truck it in from Peru. We can do the production here, so that's a direct relation to that. We use VR in justice studies to help simulate encounters where police forces or medical attendants would encounter. So rather than having the real thing, which you can only get
a little dangerous,
yeah, and you don't know when it's going to happen either. So VR simulation. So that is an example of the applied research that we're doing that really defines what a polytechnic is. Career-oriented, skill-oriented education coupled with applied research.
That's directly driven by industry.
Directly driven by the industries that we're serving here. So that's a polytechnic. And so our move to requesting the designation of a polytechnic wasn't because of what we wanted to be. It reflected what we are. And
interesting.
We've had some great conversations with the government over the last couple of years to get that moving. And here we are. But I got to give a shout out to U of L. Digvir Jayas, Dr. Digvir Jayas, who's the president that came in a year and a half or so ago. Right. When I first met him, I talked about our aspirations, and he wanted to understand it. Took the time to understand it, and U of L fully supported our move, with the condition that. And we wouldn't do it anyway. They're a degree granting institution primarily. We're a degree granting institution by need for an applied. The degrees that are applied. So we agreed, if we want to offer a degree, we'll work with U of L to say, you know what, this is completely different than what you're doing. And they would say, fine. But that's the one direction. The other direction is they've asked us to think about how we can collaborate with them for the degrees they want to offer. So in terms of an engineering related discipline, we have a lot of engineering technology components. We have a lot of labs. So we're seeing a wonderful collaboration between the two institutions that's growing over the last couple of years, and I think it's good for the region.
And that feels unique because there's often this, with the traditional community college or a polytech and university, there's often a lot of tension competing for students, limited government dollars. Feels like Lethbridge is a very different, more collaborative model.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There is that tension, and it possibly could exist here because Lethbridge is quite unique. It's got a university and a polytechnic separated by a coulee, which is for the size of the community that we're in, 110 or so thousand people.
It makes no sense on a pure math basis.
It doesn't. But what we recognize and we agree is that we have our own lanes of expertise. We're here for a purpose for students that want to go down a certain career path. They're there for a purpose for the education pathways they provide. And the opportunity is for the collaboration in that centerpiece where there's a bit of overlap. And I'm really encouraged to see that that's emerging with the two institutions.
Yeah, I know it's a big feature when we're selling to prospective companies that want to expand here or invest here. That yes, in terms of workforce, we have two options for you, and both world class, both doing amazing things.
Yeah, indeed.
A very rare commodity in a community our size.
It is. Yeah, it certainly is, and that if I think about some of the early successes in my time here, that's certainly been one of them. But it wouldn't have happened without having a great relationship with U of L.
Oh, that's great to hear. How is enrollment going? Are we, I know it's too early to see the impact of this designation change because the programming is still got to be built, but how has enrollments been trending and how is the institution doing from that perspective?
Just before I get to sort of the picture, you're right. Part of the desire to become a polytechnic was from a recruiting perspective. Okay. That we were defining who we are. We're still doing some education on what a polytechnic is, but if you used to be a college and now you're a polytechnic, that's a good thing, right? So we got to continue to do that education in the marketplace. Enrollments, a bit troubling at this point on a couple of reasons. We're trying to unlock what is the challenge in southern Alberta. It's an Alberta problem, but largely acute in southern Alberta. The transition from high school to post-secondary is about the lowest in the country.
Really?
Yep. We're not quite sure where they're going or why they're not coming. And so we've got to do a lot of work on that because I'm a firm believer, and I wouldn't have come into the education sector if I didn't believe that education is a pathway to success. It's a pathway out of poverty. It's a pathway to strong communities. And so what's happening? We're trying to unpack that, and we're going to spend a lot of time working on that. One of the things we are doing, and it's just going to open up, it's actually opened up now, but it'll open up on campus, on the Polytechnic campus later, is the Southern Alberta Collegiate. And that's a relationship between Lethbridge Polytechnic and the 6 school boards, whereby depending what high school grade you're in, you come into a different program to get exposed to technologies, to apprenticeship, to trades. So it's been a wonderful collaboration. We're renovating a building that is affectionately known as the barn. It's had a number of different purposes over its year. It's now become an education center, and so the school, the high school students will be bussed in, spend time. So we're hoping that helps to change the mind shift around what kind of careers are available in automotive, in manufacturing, in trades.
A bit more accessible if you can see and touch and experience it before you have to make decisions.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So getting that exposure, hopefully the students will be excited to go back and tell their parents, you know what, I really want to be an automotive service technician, and this is why. So that's it's part of the strategy to deal with this longer run problem. So we're seeing a percentage or so decline year over year of the number of high school transitioners.
No, that's a big concern.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. The bigger concern from an overall enrollment program is the changes that have been made since January by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, who have looking to deal with the number of foreign immigrants into the country. They've
really closed the doors on a lot of pathways for international students, right? Yeah.
So they've limited the number of study permits that will be issued across the country, a significant reduction over what it was prior to this change. And changing whether graduates can work when they graduate from here. So international students have used the education pathway as a ways to emigrate to Canada. You get an educated person coming into your workforce. With the issues around housing and access to healthcare, a lot of the blame is being put on the high levels of immigration, and with foreign international students being a component of that international influx into the country, the Liberal government has seen fit to take the stand that they're going to make those significant reductions. And so we're just in the throes of trying to understand what that means. And the current year, the students have already been pre-admitted prior to these changes. So they're here. We're seeing a little bit of softening perhaps for the winter intake, which comes in January.
Okay.
So the current year is not going to see too significant an impact. We're still trying to understand what will happen come next September.
And a lot of these changes, they felt like they came with not a lot of notice or sort of explanation. It was here's information, and we'll let you know what it means, and sort of figure it out. Yeah,
there was a bit of a rumble. It was a bit of a rumbling last year, but when the edict came down in January 22nd, there's certain dates in certain sectors you remember. That was the day that the international student world shifted, and a very heavy-handed approach, taking the same swath to the entire country. Alberta has relatively few, in comparison, international students to centers like BC, Ontario.
Right.
So this was, in my opinion, largely dealing with a Greater Toronto Area influx of a number of students into that area,
rather than looking at regional needs and really trying to diagnose what the actual issues are.
Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of. I'm going to give them benefit and say there wasn't a lot as opposed to none thought given to this. But the other change that came in a couple of weeks ago, and it affects the colleges and polytechnics, that only certain programs in certain sectors will be allowed to have international students permitted. They're looking at the ag sector, which is good for us here, healthcare, trades, which interestingly enough don't qualify for study permits at this point, but also STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math programs. So if you don't have, and there's what they call SIP codes associated with each of those. So each program has a SIP code. So civil engineering for technology will have a SIP code. And then they produced a bunch of, a list of SIP codes, 900 or so programs that would qualify. So it's been very targeted at the college and polytechnic. So we're just looking through that now. This just came to light, a week and a half ago. We're looking at what the impact's going to be, but it'll be substantive for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a financial benefit to post-secondaries because international students have higher tuition, but broader than that, they bring new ideas, they bring cultural diversity. I mean, there's enormous benefit to having that presence on your campus.
There is. Yeah, absolutely. The points you just referenced are exactly what that is. So we're the loss of international students, there's a there's less diversity on campus, less diversity of thought, less diversity of background. But they're also providing a need in the local community, filling jobs. Many of them work, as many Polytechnic students do now, but they're also filling a labor gap in the local economy. When you take a few thousand students out of a local economy.
Yeah, we've heard that loud and clear from the local business community that these students were a significant part of their workforce.
That's exactly right. And they also spend. They go to restaurants, they go to movies, they take the transit. They are putting money back into the economy as well. So there is that. The arguments have been positioned with IRCC through various lobby groups and the government. I think the Liberal government has got a path that they want to pursue, and the collateral damage will sort itself out in some way, hopefully.
Okay. If we set aside the international students for a moment, I know our friends at the institution across the coulee, they rely heavily on a draw from outside of this region. I think 75 to 80% of students at the university come from outside the immediate region. What's the Polytechnic's makeup? Is it more of a regional play and local?
It's pretty much the flip of that. We get about 75%. Currently, we get about 75% of our enrollments from what we would call the local catchment areas. So sort of the southern Alberta area. Lethbridge, of course, being the largest piece, but certainly into the regions, from Cardston to Raymond and out to even to Medicine Hat. Although Medicine Hat obviously has a college, but depending upon program desire. So about 75%, 5% or so from either the rest of Alberta, a little bit in BC, a little bit Saskatchewan, a dribble or two from Eastern Canada.
Okay.
And then the balance from international students at this point. Okay. But that mix will shift.
So for all those prospective students who are out there in the internet watching, what are the best ways that they can learn about the programs that you offer? There's the website, there's tours, but what are some of the ways that they can connect with the institution and find out more? Yeah,
certainly the website is there for all students. Polytech.ca is our new URL, although the old one's still direct. So depending where you are, that might be the only way. If you're international student or someone who's remote distance from Lethbridge will use that. We have site tours, site visits to allow students to come on board to learn about us. We do have a very strong recruiting process that travels around the region and around the province to go to high schools to talk about what we are.
Oh, so your team's actually outreach.
Yeah, we do have an outreach. But the internet, the website is by and large the place of choice, because you can get to everything. You can understand what the programs are, what the requirements are, what a sense of Lethbridge Polytechnic is like. Open house, of course, November 9th is that one's coming up.
Great.
We get a big draw for that, and a lot of our enrollments do result directly from the potential students being there, but also the parents once they see what we are. Yeah.
Because things have changed probably since they may have attended the institution.
Possibly,
or what they know of what they think they know about the institution.
Yeah, we still have some of the concrete that was poured in the 80s, but
a lot's different.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that you undertook when you first arrived was seeking stakeholder feedback. I remember having some conversations with you, and your team collectively has been synthesizing that and crafting a new strategic plan. Can you talk a little bit about the direction the institution is heading and what comes next?
No, that's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. A lot of the work we did over the last last year into early part of this year was to engage with as many stakeholders as we could. Certainly our internal community, prospective students, family members, industry, different associations, to get a sense of what they believed we needed to be, and give a sense of some of the challenges we're facing to help us craft what we needed to be. And the reason I undertook that was it's part of the new president playbook. You gotta
have a new plan. Isn't that how it works?
Yeah, but more pragmatically, we had just come out of COVID. The world had shifted during COVID. A lot of online deliveries, a lot of different behavior, different thought patterns and mindsets about the way the world should run post-COVID.
Right.
And so it was the right time to do it. And what we found was that we were highly valued as a provider of educated people. We were highly valued by the students that came and said, yeah, you do a good job. So we knew the core was definitely there. What was interesting comment, even though we've gone through a subsequent name change, was that it used to be a community college. Right. The word community doesn't exist anymore. Have you forgotten about the community? And no, we haven't. And a lot of the evidence said no, we hadn't. But there was that undertone sometimes. And I came to the conclusion, I did, the work we did, there was a lot of people involved because we had a lot of information to synthesize and theme and so on. And it became clear that we are an integral part of the community of Lethbridge. And we can't just be a taker, meaning we'll take your students, we'll take your program input. What are we giving back to the community?
Right.
And it really became clear to me that we had to do a little bit better job on that, about how do we connect with not just the people who can give us stuff, but what's our value to creating a better Lethbridge. And so that word community in that sense was around that. So that was part of, well, I'll talk about the imperatives in a minute, but it also, so that was that community piece that, we're maybe not where we need to be in terms of what community expectations are today.
Kind of putting that back front and center, that we've got to remember this thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And of course it was around student experience. So I'll talk about, we drove what we call 4 imperatives out of all that analysis. We at top of that, we created our vision, preparing learners, shaping communities. So there's that word community that came in. And our mission, we embrace our responsibility to students, employees, and stakeholders who come to us for belonging, learning, and opportunity. It's starting to roll off now. But the essence of that was the sense of belonging and caring. And that became very clear through all that analysis. And validated. We've had employees who started over the, I got here and I felt like I belonged. Students who got here and said, well, I felt I belonged right away. So we knew we were on the right track.
That's the best compliment you could possibly receive.
It absolutely is. And so what we drove out of that was, and the values, caring, responsive, and dedicated. Okay, but what about your integrity and honesty? Well, we said, when we were going through this process, those are table stakes. If you don't have that, you shouldn't be in the game.
The foundation down here.
So don't call that as an integrity.
That's not special.
No, but the caring, responsiveness, and dedication were unique to us. They might belong to somebody else, but it really defined who we are. So we took all that and said, okay, based on all this input, what are the things? We called them imperatives, not goals, because these are the things we must do.
Yeah, they're not options.
Nope, they're not.
They're something we're striving for. This is what we must execute.
Yeah. It's not we're going to try our best. It's we will.
Right.
So around the student experience, exemplary student experience, employee culture, programming, and community connections. And so those are the 4 imperatives. What we're doing now, we're just about to finalize that is, okay, so now we've said the things that are important. What do we have to do to live it? And we'll be just fine-tuning that over the next month or so, and look forward to making that public so people can see, one, here's the result of many people's input, but this is who we are. As a polytechnic, this is who we are. So over next week, the minister will be on campus to formally launch our new logo.
Nice. Which
is, I can't show you, but it's embargoed.
He does have black tape over the logo, just, to make sure we're not violating any rules.
Yeah. So this it's sometimes things happen that turn out well. The minister was supposed to be here in June, had a family emergency, had to delay till now, but it means we got we've got a new logo, we've got our strategic framework, we've got a polytechnic designation, all coming together, and here's the plan. So sometimes, despite your great plans, the world shifts and does something better.
Right. That's a good thing. Is there one thing that keeps you up at night? As you look forward into the future of the institution, is there one sort of key thing on your radar that's like, that's my biggest concern?
It's easy to say right now the international student impact, but we'll get through that. So I want to take that off the table. It's making sure we're delivering on our promise. That you're launching your career, you're getting back to our preparing learners, shaping communities, that we're actually living up, because that really is our promise. And how do we make sure in the rapidly changing world that we are living up to that promise? Programs change quickly. What's AI going to do? both to us and for us.
Yeah, it's a fascinating space. At the
it
moment.
is. So if it's what keeps me up at night is really how do we make sure that we are delivering on our promise to our students? Because I really value the fact that they have chosen to come Lethbridge Polytechnic, and they've paid their tuition. In many cases, they have scrimped and saved. Families have given up an awful lot for their children. And that's got a heavy sense of responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I take that obligation very seriously. So how do we make sure that we're continuing on that promise? Or how are we making sure that faculty development is happening? Other systems development is happening that makes us capable of doing what we have to do. That's a horrible way of saying it. Delivering on what we promised to do as we face the ever-evolving world around us.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than putting that plaque on the wall or unveiling that flashy campaign and then everyone go, yeah, no, you're not doing that.
No, you're not.
That would be a horrible place to end up.
It would be.
If you could wave your magic wand, is there one thing you would fix tomorrow in the system or in the institution or in the environment? Or
great question. One thing from a leadership perspective that's important to me is how, with a large organization, 1,000 or so people, getting alignment and unity is a constant challenge, particularly in the world as it changes. If I could get everybody aligned, recognizing everybody comes with perspectives and differences, and that's a key value of our organization, but truly understanding our promise and their contribution to that. And I'm not saying they don't, but if you got people going this way and this way and that way, it slows you down. And so how do we make sure we've got that alignment of purpose and contribution?
Everyone pulling in the same direction makes for a much faster trip.
It does. And having said that, I don't believe for a minute there's people trying not to row in the right direction, but what they think is the right direction might be opposed to the direction we need to go. And how do we help them understand?
Yeah, it comes from clarity and making sure people understand the message and
Absolutely.
all of those things, right? Yeah. Okay. Now, you did mention the fact that it's a pretty significant team. I think the fourth largest employer in the city. What do you do to sort of stay energized and take care of yourself? Because I would imagine that if you let it would be an all-consuming job. There's always something happening. I'm sure there's fires, figurative, of course, to put out here, there, and everywhere. So what do you do to take care of yourself?
I'm getting better. In my years past, I would be totally consumed, not totally consumed, but over-consumed unnecessarily. And I think I say that because I came to realize that I can let go because I've got a good team. And so there's multiple steps to this, but having a team I can trust, which I do, makes it much easier for me because I don't have to doing all the thinking and all the worrying. I can delegate the worrying.
Here, this is your problem.
But it means that I feel comfortable stepping back. So it's about getting back into. I love to read, but I haven't done a lot of that. So I don't read typically fiction. I like to read, Malcolm Gladwell and those types of books. Yep. I just find them mentally stimulating. So that helps me. I got into during COVID. I got back into cycling and did a lot of cycling, and then the transition here and everything else that happened. So I do cycle now, but it's at least in the basement watching Amazon Prime or Apple TV. So
which you can do easily.
But I'm doing it. I've got to think about getting back on the road with that. Developed. I loved photography when I was a teenager, early 20s. Kind of got out of it. Got back into it a few years ago. So that's it's how do you master the technology with the cameras, with the art of taking a good picture. You can understand the technology and take crappy pictures.
Sure.
So I find that a fascinating blend of technical and artistic, and I'm having a lot of fun with that.
No, that's good for you. Is there one sort of key leadership lesson or one key thing that you've learned in your career that you think people should know in terms of what's defined your success?
Yeah, I didn't realize it along the way, but I do value the support and contribution of people I work with. It seems kind of weird coming out of the manufacturing where it's mostly machines punching out stuff, but people still make that work. And I came out of engineering, very technically focused, but very quickly came to understand the value of people in any system, whether it's a huge people system like the Polytechnic or a less people system. It's really about the people, and getting to know the people and getting them to know you on a personal level as well.
Right.
To a degree. I don't need to know all your dark secrets, but relating with people, it plays out in spades. People feel comfortable coming to you. They feel comfortable asking you. They feel comfortable working with you. And if you have a team that values and trusts one another, that pays out in spades. So certainly for many decades now, that has been really important to me, about building that people team and understanding the dynamics of that people system.
And it all starts there. That's the foundation for all things.
Yeah. People are people. They don't come to work and stop being a person.
Right.
They come to work with the rest of their lives as part of them. And so I think, if I think about your question, what helped me was recognizing there isn't a partition between work and your other life. It doesn't end when you come to work, nor does the work end when you go home. So some people criticize me perhaps for that, but I think, how do we find a way? It's not work-life balance, I think, anymore. It's work-life blend. How do you find a way to...
Yeah, it's integrated. They're not two separate things.
They don't separate. And
right.
I think trying to separate them, it can cause some challenges. I'm not advocating for a minute you have to go home and spend your whole night thinking about, or the weekend. No, but recognize that when people come to work, they bring their entire self. And how do you work with those people?
Right, and I'm one of those people that on the weekend I will flip through email. Like it is in my home life because that's easier for me than waiting till Monday. But that's a choice I've made, right? So it works both ways.
That's a great point. That's a choice I've made. It's not a choice I expect others to make if it's not right choice for them.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that the community of Lethbridge could do better to support the Polytechnic? I think there's been, a long history of the community supporting the institution, valuing the institution financially as well as practically. Yeah. But is there something our audience for local? What can the community of Lethbridge do to better support the institution?
Well, we do get great support, as you mentioned. Even as we're going through this strategic planning discussions, we can make the comment about community. Excuse me, but they still valued us as what we do. So there is that strong reputation. And this is part on the Polytechnic. How do we get more people to come on campus? We get so many times.
There's no offense, people.
Yeah, there's not. But what's the reason to come?
Right.
Come. We got to find ways for people to come to explore, to see what they are, because invariably somebody who hasn't been there before will go, "Wow, I had no idea." So you get this perception of what the Polytechnic is. Invariably, when you see it, you shift. And I think I've got to think about ways with my team about how do we find reasons for people to come to campus. And not just because they're bringing their child for an exploratory visit.
Or going to a game. Right.
Yeah, or even when they come to the game, we don't do a good job of showing the rest of the campus. So how do we better promote who we are? So it's a bit of an oblique answer to your question, because this is as much on myself and my team as it is on the community. But get to know us, understand the value that we do provide, and if you understand who we are, what we do, what we're capable of, perhaps your child or grandchild will be motivated to want to come to the Polytechnic if the career program offerings are there for them.
Right. Now our hour's almost up, but I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts you wanted to share, anything that you wanted to communicate to our audience before we wrap up.
I've certainly covered a lot. I like to use my career as an example for students that are starting out. And like I said before, if you'd said to me, this is where I'd be at this stage in my career, there's not a chance I would have said, there's no way that path is opening for me. But it has, because I've been curious. I've taken the opportunity and had the mindset and the value of continuously learning and continuously exploring, being curious. So I would offer that because most of the employees at the Polytechnic are not doing what they thought they were doing if you went back 15, 20 years. The world unfolds, take advantage of those opportunities, but put yourself in a position where those opportunities can be taken advantage of by your learning and your mindset and your curiosity.
I would describe my own career path as not climbing the corporate ladder, but trying to survive the jungle, Jim. And sometimes you're below, sometimes you're above, sometimes you're beside. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation and
awesome.
Got to do it. Thank you.
So that wraps up this month's episode of The Edge. Brad Donaldson, the president and CEO of Lethbridge Polytechnic. Join me next month in November. Marcy Stickle will be here. She's the CEO and owner of Sky and Table Event Group. So we'll talk about her multi-decade journey as an entrepreneur in the hospitality business. We look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for watching.